So yeah, you guessed it, this video is all about layering for ski touring, ski mountaineering, off-piste skiing, whatever you want to call it. Why don't we just call it backcountry skiing? So hello, welcome back to the channel. My name's Searle and this video is all about how to clothe yourself when you're going into the backcountry, away from the lifts, skiing powder, ski mountaineering, all that kind of stuff. Now, a little caveat, a few things to talk about before we get stuck into this video. Yes, I work with RAB, so all the clothing in this video is pretty much from RAB, with the exception of some Merino base layers, which I bought myself. A lot of this clothing that I'm about to show you, I haven't actually used yet. I've only just got this clothing from RAB, but hopefully that's not going to matter too much. It's not really about kind of a review of this clothing and saying, yes, this is what you should buy. What I want to show you really is the features that I look for and the jackets and pants and everything that I've kind of chosen to use this season and why. A little bit about me and the type of skiing that I do so you can get some context, so you can kind of equate this to where you ski and what type of skiing you do. I'm an IFMGA guide. I'm based out in Chamonix in the Alps, so we're not dealing with super cold temperatures. We're not dealing with super wild weather that often. It can be really wild, but when it is like that, we're typically skiing much lower down in the forest. So when I'm clothing myself in the mountains, I'm basically basing it around a layering system. So that's a base layer, some kind of mid layer, some kind of insulation layer, and then some kind of shell. If it's particularly cold, I might also add another insulation layer that I can put on over the top of my shell layer if I have to stand around for a little bit of time. But I find when I'm skiing, I don't tend to stand around that much. I'm basically moving as much as possible, and I try and stop in the sunshine as much as possible as well. I like to think of layering as an onion. So you're putting layers on the outside. So rather than having to take something off and then put something underneath and then put that original jacket back on, we're trying to just build our layers as we go outwards. Sometimes that doesn't work. For example, if the weather's really bad and the temperature's fluctuating, we might need to stop and take our shell jacket off and then put our insulation underneath if it's getting a bit colder, or take it off. Let's look at the first layer that makes up our onion, and that is our base layer. So this is my kind of go-to base layer outfit. This is from Mons Royale and it's pure merino. It doesn't have any zips or anything up here or any hoods. I find that if I need a hood or I need a zip, then I would be wearing a different base layer, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, this is pure merino. So the nice thing about this is it doesn't get super smelly if you're using it kind of day after day. One of the problems that I find with merino is it does tend to hold a little bit more moisture than synthetic base layers. And what can happen is if you're ski touring, especially when it's really hot and you're getting quite sweaty, is that moisture can kind of stay on you. And although they say, yeah, it's warm when it's wet, you're still not going to be as warm as if you were dry. I mostly use this when I'm not sweating too much. So for example, if I'm skiing in the backcountry off a lift, you know, let's say I'm doing a Valley Blanche run and I'm going to do a ski tour from there, for example, I'd be wearing my merino, and yeah, it's going to be really good for those kind of winter months. But as things kind of warm up and I'm doing more kind of spring touring, for example, that's when I might change this top layer for a synthetic base layer like this. So a synthetic base layer like this will dry really quickly in kind of windy, warm conditions, which is great if you're, for example, ski touring up somewhere that's in the sun and then you have to drop into a cold couloir, for example. Something like this is going to be drier when you actually get into that colder environment. The other nice thing about this is it's got a very nice lightweight hood that I can kind of shelter out of the sun a little bit as well. That's one of the big issues even in the springtime, is keeping sun off your face and neck. So from probably mid-April onwards, unless I'm going somewhere super high, I'm probably going to lose those base layer leggings because they're quite difficult to take off when you've got ski boots on, ski pants, you know, it's just quite an ordeal to take those off if you're getting really warm. So if it's exceptionally hot and you're going out like spring corn skiing, for example, you might consider not wearing those base layer pants from the start. One consideration we should talk about is our actual underwear, our boxer shorts that we're wearing underneath these base layer leggings. Now I steer well clear of anything that's made of cotton, cotton really absorbs the water from your sweat, and that's going to stay wet for the whole day. It's not going to dry out. So a t-shirt is going to be really bad news in the backcountry. It's going to absorb a lot of that water from your sweat, and it's going to stay wet for a long time. So synthetic or merino is good, but the downsides there are, yeah, synthetic can smell a little bit more, and merino can just hold a little bit more of that moisture. So the next layer that I typically put on is kind of a fleece mid layer, which is just a little bit of light insulation that can sit underneath my shell jacket when, you know, it's kind of those average temperatures that you get in the Alps. So this is the RAB Tecton. It's really nice and breathable. So, you know, it doesn't have any panels on it that are going to hold that extra moisture in. It's nice and relaxed fit. It's really easy wearing. So I'd probably be wearing this for sort of like free ride days, lift access stuff. But for ski mountaineering, I probably wouldn't like this design as much because there's pockets here, and basically they're not going to be particularly useful when I have a harness on over the top of those. In fact, those zips might kind of get in the way a little bit. But this is more of a relaxed, you know, fleece top that I would probably use for, you know, downhill skiing. So if it's particularly cold, I might put on something just a little bit heavier like this. This is the men's Ascender or Summit hoodie, and it's got kind of like a piled fleece on the upper part of the body here, and a little bit more windproof resistance on the shoulders as well. So if I'm ski touring and it's particularly cold, this might be the layer that I'm in. Nothing around here, so it's really comfortable with a harness on. This layer, I really feel like you probably want 2 or 3 options, ideally. So something that works really well when it's quite warm, so something that's light and thin and flexible. And then, yeah, something that's a little bit warmer for when it's colder. So the next layer to think about really is the outer layer for the legs. This is the RAB Chroma Kinetic bib, and it's a nice light stretchy material that feels really comfortable next to the skin. So in spring ski touring, this would be a really good option for me. If it's getting particularly hot on the way up, remember I'm going to be wearing a harness here, and that's kind of going to act as a belt, so I can just pop the bib down and have that hanging down there. But this would be a really good option for if I'm boot packing up a couloir or I'm doing any kind of technical climbing, because it's got a lot more stretch to it. Features that I look for on ski pants for sure are 2 big pockets on the thighs. Those are really useful for little bits and pieces, gloves, snacks. If you've got skins that fold up really small, you can actually keep those in that pocket too. And it's a really easy place when you're doing quick transitions. The bib pocket here has somewhere for my beacon. That's really important to have it somewhere away from where my harness is, that I can easily get to it if I need to, and it's somewhere it can't be ripped off because these bibs are going to be, you know, solid on me. I'm definitely looking for long vent zips on the side here that I can dump out excess heat if I need to. It's nice to have ones that have multiple zippers, so you can either zip from the bottom or zip from the top. These bibs actually have a long zipper on the side here, which means that I can go to the toilet if I need to. So it's quite nice to choose bibs that have something like that you can use the toilet if you need to. So yeah, this is what it looks like with my ski mountaineering harness on. I've got access to those thigh pockets super easily, but there's nothing in here that I'm trying to get my hands or something into. You know, I've got access to the fly, and as I said, if it's really warm in the springtime, I can drop that down a little bit and it's just going to feel a little bit less kind of warm and claustrophobic. Yeah, really great pads. Check them out on the RAB website. I'm going to leave links to all these items down in the description of this video, so you can check them out and see what you think as well. So these are the Chroma Le Top Goretex Pro pants. This is what I'll be wearing when the weather's really wild, and let's say I'm sat on a chairlift and it's storming, or if I'm just doing some downhill laps and I just want kind of a relaxed kind of fit pant that I can maybe even take the suspenders off and just use a belt to hold them up as well. Again, features that I look for with a pant like this are those zip leg pockets. It's nice to have somewhere where you can stash your gloves or put bits and pieces. I might even have my beacon in this pocket as well. And in here it has a little loop that you can clip your beacon onto, and also a little kind of stretchy pocket in there that stops it from moving around when you're skiing. So that's a really important feature for me, because I find if the beacon twists sideways, it can be a little bit weird and uncomfortable. Basically, these are just really burly Gore-Tex pants that are great for kind of storm skiing and stuff like that. The only other pants that I'm not going to talk about in this video because I don't want it to get too long is like a thinner soft shell pant that is super breathable. Those can be really great when it's warm weather in the springtime. So you could consider having something like that. Before we move on to jackets, just a little thought about sizing. These are actually a size large, and for me, I feel like that's perfect for kind of freeride skiing. They're a little bit kind of on the looser side, which I quite like. And the other pants that I spoke about before, the Bibs, those were a medium. So yeah, checking out the size a little bit before you kind of get involved. But generally, I'm going for slightly smaller size for kind of ski mountaineering orientated stuff where I might be actually climbing, abseiling, doing rope work, and then slightly larger size for kind of free ride downhill skiing. So the next layer to think about is that insulating layer, which might sit underneath or over the top of your shell jacket, depending on whether it's really bad weather, whether you're doing a short transition through a cold section of the tour. Having a layer that can work kind of on the inside and on the outside is quite a good idea. This is the Zen Air Alpine Insulated Jacket. This would really work best underneath my shell jacket, but if I wanted to, I could also probably put it on over the top. It's not very often in the Alps that I'm wearing a base layer, a thin fleece, an insulated jacket like this and a shell jacket when I'm skiing. There's probably only a few weeks of the year that it's actually cold enough to consider wearing that much clothing. A thinner down jacket could be a good idea, and it might be more what I'm carrying when I'm out ski mountaineering because it's nice and light and it packs down a lot smaller than this. The difference between synthetic and down is synthetic does stand up to a lot more abuse when it's wet. So I might consider wearing this on one of those like stormy days where things are just getting a little bit wet because it's just generally, you know, not super cold, but I am cold and I need that extra insulation. A down jacket would be really good when it's super cold and dry because that insulation is going to work really well and it's much lighter and more compressible. So I generally go for down stuff when I'm ski mountaineering, and I'm generally, you know, having synthetic insulation when I'm sort of skiing on the lifts or doing any storm skiing. One thing to consider with these insulated jackets is it's really nice to have a big enough hood that would be able to kind of stretch over a helmet. Another really nice feature to consider is having a two-way zipper, so a zipper that opens from the bottom like this. If you have your harness on underneath and it's just around your bibs, for example, then it's nice to be able to zip the jacket kind of out of the way and just use the belay loop for rappelling or, you know, rope work on a glacier, for example, which we do quite a lot of the time in the Alps. So the next layer that I would put on over the top of this kind of outfit is my big Goretex jacket, which is kind of totally storm-proof. It's something that's going to be basically giving me that protection in really bad weather. This is the Chroma Goretex Pro jacket. And again, I ordered this in a size large so I could have a little bit more of a kind of baggy fit when I'm kind of freeride and downhill skiing. Really important features for me on a jacket like this are having these internal gaiters, sleeve things that go in the cuff of the jacket there. I find that's super useful, especially when I'm using a jacket for mostly downhill skiing, because I have what I call an under the cuff glove, so something that's quite tight around here. It's not a big gauntlet that goes on the outside of the jacket. So that glove goes easily over this, and then this just pulls down over. So you're not fighting around with your gloves too much. I've done a big video before on gloves, so you should go and check that out, because I think that's a really important subject that people kind of tend to get a little bit wrong sometimes with skiing. So having these internal gaiters, I think, is a must for a big kind of Gore-Tex outer layer. Having a big Velcro tab, you can close that up as well over the glove, so you can really get just a full storm-proof fit over your glove. Is really nice when you're skiing in deep powder. Other features that I'm looking for in a jacket like this are pit zips, some way that I can sort of vent a little bit of the excess heat if I'm just getting a little bit hot during a run. I'm really looking for a big storm-proof hood that has nice ways that I can close it up around my face, or those really burly kind of lift line sitting on the chairlift for a long time. I can really get nice and cozy in there and stay warm in between runs. I find that's a good way to stay a lot more motivated on those really wild days. Here, having a nice chest pocket that I can put stuff in. Again, I might have my phone in here and my beacon down on my leg, and I feel like that's kind of far enough apart that it's not going to be interfering with the beacon. If I was really worried about that, I would turn my phone off and I would just stick it in my bag. This jacket's got a removable powder skirt, which I think is a good idea to have on, like storm skiing days as well. But it's quite nice that you can also take it off. Again, this jacket has got a two-way zipper, so if I am skiing on the glacier, I can also access my harness if I need to as well. So going back to my more kind of ski mountaineering setup, my ski touring, you know, going out and doing things which might be sort of technical touring or just, you know, ski touring up through powder, back in the Chroma Kinetic bib. And I want to give a nod to a jacket like this. This is called the Vital Hooded Jacket, which is basically just a super lightweight windproof jacket, and it packs down really, really small. And this is something that I might have in my bag as an emergency layer to give to people, but it also can be really handy when you're like boot packing up a couloir, for example, and you want something that's super breathable but is just kind of snowproof to keep the snow from sticking to a fleece like this. So having a nice thin windproof top like this can be a really nice layer, and it can sometimes be all I'm carrying in the springtime if I'm, you know, doing a lightweight mission and I just want to keep the weight down as much as possible. I might have this and then just, you know, a thin insulating layer on the top as well. So something like this could be a really good idea for some people. It's just a really simple basic windproof, and it can be used for other things as well, you know, for mountain biking, for hiking, all that kind of stuff. So it's quite a versatile layer and relatively inexpensive as well. So talking about my shell layer that I might be using when I'm ski mountaineering, this is the Chroma Kinetic Jacket. Yeah, same material as the bibs down here, but there's a few different things with the design which sort of drew me into getting this jacket instead of others. So again, a nice big helmet compatible hood, but on this jacket this doesn't have those sleeve gaiters, and I find that generally when I'm out ski mountaineering I'm going to be using a gauntlet glove instead, because I might be doing something where I have my hands over my head and I want that glove that's going to, you know, shed snow down off this way. I can very easily just have a thin light glove underneath there and then just close that tab up really quickly and easily as well, and I'll probably have those thin gloves on for most of the time. So this has got two chest pockets which are actually venting, so you can also use this as a way of kind of getting rid of a bit of excess heat if you needed to as well, without having to have the jacket fully unzipped. But obviously, you know, if you've got stuff in there, you might be risking losing it. This one does actually have an internal phone pocket, so you could put your phone in there if you wanted to. But again, with this, I'm probably going to have my beacon up here, which means that I might have my phone down on my leg pocket. I use my phone all the time for navigation, taking photos. I generally put it into aeroplane mode as much as I can. But yeah, I like to have my phone kind of on me because it is a useful tool as well. So this jacket, rather than having kind of bigger pit zips, they have pit zips on the back of the arm, just short ones here, which can give you just a way of dumping out a bit of excess heat, but without, you know, snow getting into your jacket when you're like wallowing up a couloir, for example. So that's kind of my shell layer for ski mountaineering, ski touring and stuff like that. And different from the sort of freeride setup that I was showing before, I had synthetic insulation that was underneath that shell jacket for those really cold days. With this kind of setup, I kind of want my insulation to be able to go on and off on the outside of everything. Because what might be happening is I might be taking a cold chairlift up and then skiing down and then doing a transition to go ski touring, and at that point is when I want to take my insulation layer off. It's really quick and easy to do that with a jacket that's on the outside rather than having to take something off from the inside. So for my insulation piece for this kind of outfit, I'm going to have a kind of reasonably big down jacket that I'm going to use most of the time, but it's nice and light and also quite packable. So, you know, it's not a huge jacket, it's not like a box wall down jacket or anything. Don't tend to find that you need something that big in the Alps. The nice thing about this is the material is fairly hard wearing and kind of snowproof, so if you do end up having to ski in it as well, it's going to stand up to that. The nice thing about Rad Down is they use Nick Wax hydrophobic down, so the down does stand up to kind of wetter conditions a lot more as well. So I sized this a little bit larger as well. So this is a large, whereas the previous jacket underneath there was a medium. So that just means it's a little bit easier to get over the top of everything, and I just find that it sort of like sits just a little bit bigger and kind of more comfortably over the top of a smaller jacket. I really like super simple cuffs with these types of jacket, just an elasticated cuff rather than having to do something with a bit of Velcro, and I find it's a lot easier to take the jacket off and keep it from going inside out, which means that it's a lot quicker to change between layering systems as well. So yeah, not much to say about a down jacket like that. I might add that into my other layering system as well for freeride skiing if it's particularly cold and I want something to go on the outside of everything. But in those conditions, it's probably going to be quite dry as well. So one other thing that's probably worth mentioning as well is these down shorts. These are the Mythic shorts, and I like these because they have a full length zip on both sides. So you can easily put them on over ski boots and skis and things like that, just sort of stationary. And I carry these around quite a lot, even though I don't actually use these that much. And the reason for that is it's for kind of emergency situations. You know, if somebody has an accident and you're stuck somewhere in the shade, it's really nice to have an extra layer. And there's a lot of blood in your thighs. So if you can keep that blood warm, you're going to stay a lot warmer for a lot longer. Sometimes I throw these on if it's a particularly cold day and I'm going downhill for a long time, then I'll have these on as well. It's nice, they have synthetic insulation on the back, so if you're sat on a wet chairlift, for example, that's going to stand up to a little bit more moisture abuse. So yeah, that's generally the systems that I'm using for skiing, backcountry skiing, ski mountaineering out in the Alps. There is some variation to that as well. I maybe add, you know, thinner insulation, thinner fleeces, thicker base layers, thinner base layers, all that kind of stuff if there's some really big fluctuations in temperature. But yeah, having about a 4-layer system I find works really well. Sometimes that might be 5 layers if you were to add in that windproof, for example. But yeah, having something in that sort of region is going to work really well. So we're not going to talk about gloves or helmets or buffs or any of that kind of stuff in this video. As I said, I have done a video about gloves before in the past, and I'm going to do a video about kind of headwear and stuff that I use, you know, helmets, goggles, sunglasses, hats, caps, all that kind of stuff. I feel like that's almost its own kind of short video, but hopefully you found it really useful, and hopefully it's going to give you some inspiration about what you need to get hold of for your backcountry ski adventures, or what you might be missing in your quiver of stuff that you already have already. Thanks very much for watching. I'll leave it there, and yeah, I'll see you again very soon. Cheers guys.